The intake briefing lasted 11 minutes. I know because I counted. There was nothing else to do while Sorval read the tier parameters aloud in careful, unhurried cadence the Kethvi use when they want the words to land like stones. 9 tiers, he said. Each tier reduces ambient temperature by 6 degrees and atmospheric pressure by 9%, while increasing gravitational load by a factor of 3. Tier 9 represents the documented physiological ceiling for all enrolled species. No candidate has cleared it. This is not a record. It is a wall. He looked at me once when he said that last part, not unkindly. The way a doctor looks at you before delivering a number. I was the only human in the cohort of 23. The others were Kethvi, mostly, a compact, dense-muscled species from a mid-gravity world with a circulatory system so efficient their field medics basically don't exist. 2 were Thesavine, tall and thin, built for low-pressure, high-altitude environments. 1 was a Durathi, species had literally evolved inside a glacier, and whose idea of a warm day would hospitalize me under normal circumstances. I was, on paper, the least qualified candidate in the room. The exchange clause that got me here said Human Geological Survey Technician, Antarctic certification, solo winter over seasons. Sorval had read it. He'd said nothing. He had simply assigned me candidate slot 23, was the last slot, and moved on. The Vaethorin Collegiate of Applied Endurance ran its assessments in a sealed environmental column. A vertical shaft, 40 meters tall, segmented into tiers by pressure gates. You entered at Tier 1. Each time you completed the task set, a physical problem, a cognitive puzzle, a load carry, repair sequence, the gate above you opened and the environment stepped down. You could tap out at any gate. Most candidates tapped out between Tier 5 and Tier 7. Tier 8 had been cleared twice in the institution's history. Tier 9, never. I went in on a Tuesday. Vaethorin didn't call them Tuesdays, but I did. Tier 1 was cool and thin-aired, about the equivalent of a moderately bad day at 3,000 meters. I'd spent a winter at Concordia Station on the Antarctic Plateau, where the altitude equivalent runs closer to 4,000, and the temperature drops to -80 before the wind finds you. Tier 1 felt like someone had left a window open. I completed the load carry problem, shifting a series of weighted panels into a structural figuration, and the first gate opened. Tier 2 added the pressure drop. My ears adjusted. I kept moving. By Tier 4, 2 of the Kethvi had tapped out. I heard the pneumatic release of the exit valves, distant and final. The Thesavine ahead of me. I could see them through the pressure-hardened observation port in the wall. Were moving well. The Durathi was extraordinary, methodical and unhurried, their movements perfectly calibrated for the load. I wasn't competing with the Durathi. I was competing with the architecture. Tier 5 introduced the cognitive component. A repair sequence on a damaged pressure coupling, tools that didn't quite fit my hands, and instructions written in a symbology I'd been given 40 minutes to study the night before. Worked it the way I'd worked every piece of failed equipment I'd ever touched in a polar winter, which is slowly, without panic, in the right order. The couplings sealed, the gate opened. Tier 6 was where it started to feel familiar in a way I hadn't expected. Temperature had dropped enough that my breath was visible. The gravity load. I was wearing a weighted harness by now, the kind the Kethvi physiology handles through sheer cardiovascular density, was beginning to matter. My legs knew it, but my legs had pulled sledges across blue ice in 70-kilometer winds, and they had a kind of cellular memory for this specific complaint. Kept working. Tier 7. The Thesavine tapped out, both of them, within minutes of each other. Through the monitoring glass, I could see the observation room, and I could see the Kethvi's attendants watching their instruments with an attention they hadn't been giving the screens 20 minutes earlier. Sorval was standing. He'd been sitting before. Durathi cleared Tier 7 alongside me. We didn't speak, you can't really, at that pressure. But they looked at me through their side of the shaft with something I couldn't quite read. Acknowledgement, maybe. Tier 8. The Durathi tapped out at the Tier 8 gate. Not in the tier, at the gate before entering. They stood there for a long moment, pressed the exit panel with one deliberate hand. I watched them go, then I went through. Tier 8 was genuinely unpleasant. I'll say that clearly. The cold was deep enough to matter. The kind that finds the gaps in your clothing and starts working on the skin beneath. The kind my body knew from the long midwinter nights at Concordia, when the heating in the outer research module failed, and the repair team was 4 hours out. The gravity load made every movement a negotiation. The cognitive task, a navigation problem, plotting a route through a pressure gradient map with changing variables, required me to hold a lot of numbers in my head while my head was operating at altitude equivalent and under physical load. I finished it. I didn't finish it quickly. I want to be accurate about that. It took me 41 minutes, which I know because the timer was displayed on the problem panel. But I finished it, and the Tier 8 gate opened, and on the other side was a pressure door I'd been told, in the briefing 11 minutes long, no candidate had ever opened. Tier 9, in front of it for about 3 seconds. Not from hesitation. I was taking inventory. Hands still functional, cognition clear, legs tired but tracking, breathing elevated but rhythmic. The checklist my Antarctic supervisor had drilled into me, the one you run when you're a long way from help and you need an honest read on your own condition, came back clean. I went through. What happened Tier 9 I will describe plainly, because plain is the only way to describe it. The temperature was below anything the posted parameters had listed as survivable for my species. My body disagreed with that assessment. The gravity load was severe enough that I had to change how I walked. Shorter steps, deliberate weight transfer. The same adjustment I'd learned. Dragging equipment over wind-scoured ice with a harness cutting into my shoulders. The cognitive task was a structural analysis problem, dense and multi-layered. I worked it the way I'd worked everything else, in the right order, without panic. The panel accepted my answer. There was a long pause, longer than the gates had taken before. I stood and waited. Then a sound I hadn't heard anywhere else in the column. Not the clean, pneumatic release of a gate, but a different mechanism, slower, as if something was being opened that hadn't been opened in a long time, or possibly had never been opened at all. Above me was a ceiling panel I hadn't noticed. It unlocked. Beyond it was the top of the column, the observation deck, where the assessment staff stood. I climbed up through the access ladder, and when I came over the lip of the hatch, I was standing in the middle of the monitoring room. Sorvale was 2 meters away. He was holding a document, a physical document, even I knew was unusual. Vaethorin ran on digital records, and in the margin of that document he had written something by hand. He looked at me for a moment with the careful attention of someone recalculating. "There is no Tier 10 form," he said. "I know," I said. "Do you keep the blank ones?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he set the document down on the console, went to a cabinet in the corner that I suspect had not been opened during my lifetime, produced a form so old the header font had been updated twice since it was printed. He handed it to me. "You will need to fill in the parameters yourself," he said. "We don't have existing data for what Tier 10 should contain." I looked at the form. It was blank from the 3rd field onward. "That's fine," I said. "I'll need a pen." He gave me one. I sat down at the console, the one his attendants had vacated, when I came through the hatch, stepping back in that instinctive way people do when they need to recalibrate the room. And I started writing in the numbers. Nobody interrupted me. The column hummed below us, waiting.